Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Heroes of the Storm is probably in my top 10 games of all time, and it's without a doubt my favorite MOBA of all time. Granted, my outside MOBA experience is a few hours of League of Legends, but I think it's still not that outlandish of a conclusion to reach. And every time I see anything related to it, I get a little bit sad that it was abandoned by Blizz and put into maintenance mode. Today, we'll be going over an extremely truncated version of the game's history, why I love it like I do, and its tragic downfall. HOTS's roots reach all the way back to Warcraft 3, which included an application called the World Editor. This could be used to create custom levels and game modes, or, if you are like me, realize that you know nothing about game design backend because you could never get anything to work remotely properly. One of the most popular custom game modes to come out of this was Defense of the Ancients, or Dota, where you would start out by picking a hero and then using that hero on a team, try to destroy the enemy's base before they could destroy yours. The mode was so popular, in fact, that it was adapted into its own actual game, becoming Dota 2 and renaming and redesigning its characters to avoid copyright disputes. Dota 2 is still very popular to this day, as is League of Legends, which emerged at the top of the MOBA craze of the time. Blizzard understandably wanted to get in on this genre, especially given that their own software had birthed it. And although a bit late to the party, they did release their own MOBA in 2014, Heroes of the Storm. Its roster was filled with popular characters from its three main IPs, Warcraft, StarCraft, and Diablo, and eventually several Overwatch heroes and the Lost Vikings, plus the two HOTS original characters, Orphea and Kahira. Now, personally, I would have preferred if they'd stuck to just Warcraft heroes, as I have very minimal investment in the other IPs, and think their heroes could be mapped to Warcraft characters, but that's just my own wish, and I still adore the game as it is. To stand out from the crowd though, HOTS had to shake up the formula in major ways, and these changes are exactly what made it so great to me, and most of these innovations were focused on making the game more accessible to new players. It was almost derogatorily referred to as a casual MOBA, but filling that niche is actually what made it great in my opinion. Here are just a few of the major differentiations that the game brought with it. No out-of-match power-ups. There is absolutely nothing stopping a brand new player from playing at the same level as a veteran player other than raw experience, which makes it far less frustrating to jump in. I seem to remember this being a thing in League of Legends, though I don't know if it still is or if it is in other MOBAs. No items. There is no in-match shop for you to buy equipment for your heroes. This greatly simplifies the learning curve of both the game as a whole and of individual heroes. Talents. I don't know if these are completely absent in most MOBAs, but I don't remember them in LoL, where leveling up just had you choose one of your abilities to upgrade the numbers on. Talents in HOTS were a great way to customize your gameplay, either in response to a matchup, such as taking giant killer talents against a very tanky team, or to simply play a hero in a way that fits you compared to other players. This added a small degree of complexity to make up for the absence of items, but you usually only had 3 or 4 choices per talent, and eventually, you were able to favorite talents to make it easier to select them during a match if you don't play a given hero often enough to have memorized them. An emphasis on objectives and team fights. While laning was of course still very important, you were unlikely to win if you did that the whole game. Objectives would pop up from time to time, or in some cases could be triggered, such as in Tomb of the Spider Queen, that required your attention. These objectives often became the battle site for vigorous team fights, which could seldom be won if you were too outnumbered. In the same vein, winning a team fight and rendering the enemy team dead at an opportune time, such as right before an objective, could pay fantastic dividends. That being said, it often felt like you could make a comeback even late in the game if you managed to come out ahead of a team fight, so there was rarely a reason to give up. Shared Team XP. In HOTS, your team levels up as a unit. As long as you have heroes near enemy units when they die, it will contribute to that XP. This helped curb more competitive, arguably toxic behaviors such as last hit stealing, and avoided situations where one player became the carry for a team. It also made for temporary danger situations, as level 10 and 20 talents were very powerful, usually granting your strongest ability and an upgrade to it. Since the whole team would get these at once, they could have a window of opportunity to capitalize on this power gap before the enemy team caught up. But XP climbs were not so punishing that you would fall irreparably behind very often. Map diversity. Possibly the most important change HOTS accomplished was to create a diverse pool of maps to shake up the gameplay, compared to LoL, where it's pretty much just Summoner's Rift over and over and over. HOTS maps offered both aesthetic variety and unique objectives, and other factors such as reducing the lane count to 2 on some maps, all while preserving the general MOBA feeling. A total of 15 maps were added to the pool over the game's life. Alterac Pass, Battlefield of Eternity, Blackheart's Bay, Braxis Holdout, Cursed Hollow, Dragonshire, Garden of Terror, Hanamura Temple, Haunted Mines, Infernal Shrines, Sky Temple, Tomb of the Spider Queen, Towers of Doom, Volskaya Foundry, and Warhead Junction. Of those 15 maps, only one of them, Haunted Mines, was semi-permanently retired, as it just seemed too difficult for Blizzard to balance, and I'm sure the whole concept of a separate area that you could teleport into probably caused issues as well. But hey, you can still play that one in custom games as well. Shorter games. Your average HOTS game lasts about 22 minutes, probably about half the duration of a League of Legends game. This made games more frenetic, but thankfully, games never felt rushed either. More exotic heroes. This lessened over time, and perhaps other MOBAs have embraced this concept since, but HOTS was well known for having some very strange heroes that broke the rules. Abathur, a very weak hero that contributed by spawning units to help lane, and by empowering his fellow heroes. Sergeant Hammer, who had tremendous range, but who had to root herself to use that range and could be caught vulnerable if not careful. Murky, a very squishy hero that gave reduced XP if killed and who would quickly respawn, but who still had to be careful not to feed and to keep his respawn point hidden or protected. The Lost Vikings, who played as 3 separate units, allowing you to maintain XP gains from multiple lanes during objectives without devoting as many resources, but who had to be closely monitored to keep from dying. Misha, a bear that could soak up lots of damage and respawn fairly quickly as long as her supporting unit Rexar didn't die. Cho'Gall, 2 heroes that shared a body and had to be played together. Deathwing, who played like a raid boss with massive damage potential but who had severely limited healing capabilities. And many, many more. Also to the game's advantage, though not a facet of the game itself, was simply its integration into Battle.net, and its overlapping player base with other Blizzard titles. While the gameplay was amazing, what made HOTS so dang fun to me was being able to very conveniently play it with all of my WoW friends. So HOTS was doing amazing things. It may not have been considered the epitome of competitive gameplay like LoL or Dota 2 often were, but it didn't need to. It still had professional players, and it sort of catered to a different audience. How then did it reach a point where it had to be put into maintenance mode? Well, I don't know why, but there were 3 major events in the game's decline. The first might be considered a minor one, but I would count HOTS' original heroes. We only ever got 2 of them, the previously mentioned Orphea and Kahira, but absolutely nobody liked these chicks, and it felt like a weird attempt to defy what the game was. We loved the HOTS roster because it was filled with characters from other games that we loved. The second was the mishandling of the competitive scene. Originally, this was done purely through grassroots tournaments and the like, with no Blizzard involvement whatsoever. At some point, they decided that they did want to facilitate matters and created the HGC, or Heroes of the Storm Global Championship. They pumped a lot of resources into this, complete with handsome prize rewards and even getting coverage on ESPN. However, at a certain point, for whatever reason, the decision was made that this wasn't working out and the HGC was unceremoniously cancelled in 2018, leaving participants in a rough spot at the sudden change in plans. It was bad for the game and bad optics. Blizz would have been better off never having muscled their way into the competitive branch of the game in the first place, but they did, and that crippled the community's willingness to spring back from this moment. And thirdly was the end of support. I know that for a long time, HOTS had a very rigorous content cadence, and I never expected it to continue at that pace forever. I wouldn't have wanted it to. We'd have way too many heroes by now if they had. But they could have simply scaled things back, release only a few heroes a year instead of one every month. This is kind of what actually happened for about a year before the brakes were really pumped, and I think had they stuck with this cadence, the game could still maintain a decent audience. Even just one new hero every 4 to 6 months would be enough to maintain a degree of hype and relevancy. Instead, they went into Skeleton Crew mode. The game's penultimate hero, Deathwing, was announced online shortly before BlizzCon 2019, and it wasn't because the game just had too much else to feature at the convention. It was a sign that someone at Blizzard made the determination that HOTS was so irrelevant that it couldn't even get a 5-minute focus at Blizzard's own convention. But you know what was important enough to include? A spiel about the stupid Blitzchung controversy and how it was being handled. The game received virtually no updates thereafter, with its final hero, Hogger, releasing well into the following year. I can't say for sure exactly why Blizz decided to forego further growing the game. I mean, it's money, obviously. It was never going to be anything other than money. I personally feel that resources could have been scaled back and tournament play nourished without needing to invest that much on Blizzard's end, but I also have no idea what I'm talking about. What I do know is that I never did my part to show my support for the game financially, and so perhaps that speaks to the game's monetization model being flawed. I only ever spent $3.50 on the game for a Sylvanas skin that I don't even usually use, and that was before they implemented HOTS 2.0, which made nearly every collectible in the game obtainable for free through its crafting system. Had it been after, I wouldn't have even needed to spend that. Yet, I still own every hero in the game because even before the content drip stopped, you could earn the in-game gold to spend on new heroes at about the same rate they were added to the game. Simply doing your dailies diligently, which wasn't hard as you could just play AI matches, meant you had full access to all of the game's content for free. I compare it to Hearthstone, a game that, at least comparatively, was far more greedy and predatory, and how I probably spent about $200 on it over the span of 2 or 3 years. And I like to think that HOTS withered away simply because it was too generous to its player base. It was too good for this world, and we didn't give it the love it deserved. That probably wasn't the actual core problem, but I like to think it is. HOTS is still playable to this day. You can still hop in, queue up, and enjoy a few games. I still do every few months, always playing whatever hero I have that's the least leveled up. And it is still fun, make no mistake about that. But there is a sadness to a live service game that isn't really being serviced anymore. Especially one that was so dang well made. For this week's drawing, I of course had a whole slew of characters I could have chosen from. Just looking at the Warcraft characters on the roster, I had 43 options. But ultimately, I decided to go with one of the 3 Warcraft characters that was introduced through Heroes of the Storm. Lunara. Lunara holds the prestigious title of being the first daughter of Cenarius, the first of the Dryads. She actually has a very minimal presence within WoW itself. She shows up in the Druid Order Hall, the Dream Grove, where she just pats around, and she shows up twice in Dragonflight, once in the Onaran Plains and once in the open world Amirdrasil zone. But again, she doesn't really do anything. She had far more of a presence both in Heroes of the Storm itself, as well as Hearthstone, where she was introduced as an alternative hero skin for the Druid class. And I like Lunara well enough. She sort of takes her position seriously and acts as the most martial of all the Dryads we know. I do love the little detail that she hates being confused with Mylune, who of course was far more ditzy and at the time, probably the most well-known Dryad / forest nymph in WoW. And yeah, she just seemed like a logical choice to go with here. She holds a somewhat important position, and I'm probably never going to get to draw her for any other video, or any other Dryad for any other video. And I decided to draw her in Val'sharah just because that's where the Dream Grove is, and it's kind of fitting, I guess. And I like Val'sharah. It's not one of my favorite zones, but it's up there. It does feel almost a bit patchworky though, because you have the main forest section, which itself has a huge section corrupted by the Nightmare. And then on the west coast, you've got Blackrook Hold, which is this haunted Night Elf fortress. And south of that, you have Bradensbrook, which is this farm area inhabited by Gilnean migrants. It's kind of interesting how diverse they made the place. But I chose to draw her in what I considered the default Val'sharah look, which is, you know, just green forest. But I do like the spirally bits to it that are supposed to be reminiscent of the Emerald Dream. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this video. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye!